I will read off the agencies I see online, and if you could, everyone from that agency could introduce themselves. Let's go ahead and start with SCTA. I'm Dana Trey.
I'm Janet Spillman.
I'm Shauna Gauze.
Drew Nichols.
Thank you. And Santa Rosa City Bus.
Hey, good morning. Sean Sosa here.
Transportation Land Use Coalition. I see Steve Bertelbaugh. He's on mute.
Oh, good morning.
Morning.
Bertelbaugh.
And Smart.
I'm Emily Betts with Smart.
I'm Chris Bearden.
And Golden Gate Transit.
Hi, Jacob Brown with Finance at Golden Gate Transit. I think somebody from planning should be showing up, but if not, I'll be here.
Thanks. And Marin Transit.
Good morning, Robert Betts, Marin Transit.
Thanks. And I see Colin Thoma. Could you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm just listening in. I'm with Disability Services and Legal Center here in San Jose.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch your affiliation.
Sorry about that. I'm just listening in. I'm with Disability Services and Legal Center in San Jose.
Thank you. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Oh, I see David is just joining from Golden Gate Transit as well. Let's go ahead and get started with approval of the notes from our last meeting, which was May 12th. Does anyone have any comments or corrections on the notes? All right, hearing none, let's assume those are good to go. And let's move on to regional funding. First in your agenda packet is the Measure M project Citizens Advisory Committee presentation status and schedule for fiscal year 21-22. And I will go ahead and just pull up the schedule and let Shauna talk about it.
Thank you, Dana. So this should just be quick. This schedule was taken, just to give you a little bit of background. The Citizens Advisory Committee is the body that is responsible for oversight of Measure M. And as you know, the Sonoma County operators all receive Measure M transit funding. So the Citizens Advisory Committee has asked on a number of occasions to be updated on transit operations. And in the past, we hadn't had the transit operators on the schedule for presentations to the Citizens Advisory Committee the way that we had all the rest of the Measure M project sponsors. So we've added them in, and we added them in last year. But last year was kind of a special case, but because the Citizens Advisory Committee has repeatedly requested that we get updates from the transit operators, we have added them to the schedule, and it will be a regular occurrence once a year. You only have to come once a year, but we do put all the transit operators at one time. This accepts Smart. Smart gets to come separately because they also receive Measure M funding in other categories. So this just applies to the bus transit operators. And so just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware that the transit operators are scheduled to present to the Citizens Advisory Committee on September 27th. Oh, that says 2020 as well, but it's really meant as 2021. So it is always the last Monday of the month at 4 o'clock. And we do try to put the Measure M recipients presentations at the top of the agenda so that you don't have to stick around for the whole meeting. That concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Just to confirm, that will not include Golden Gate Transit, correct?
That is correct. It does not, because Golden Gate Transit does not receive Measure M funding.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. Thank you.
Sure. Great, thank you very much.
Thanks, Shauna. All right, next on the agenda is the Transportation Fund for Clean Air and Transportation Development Act, Article 3 project quarterly report for the end of fiscal year 2021. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again just to draw your attention to the TFCA report here. So the first page is TDA 3, and second page here is TFCA. I just wanted to draw everyone's attention to a new column that I added in, which includes the project start deadline. This is something that has always been in the guidance that you generally have until the following end of calendar year to start the projects. There have been some modifications due to COVID and just there's generally been a lot of delays in projects. So they have adjusted that policy for, I believe it's FY 19, 20, 21, and 22 projects to be until the end of the next fiscal year or 24 months after the agreement was signed. So this makes it a little bit harder to track. So I just wanted to include this column that shows the project start deadline. I have highlighted a couple of deadlines here that are coming up for projects that we haven't seen invoices for yet. That doesn't necessarily mean that you need to invoice then, but you do need to have some sort of tangible action taken to start the project. That could be a procurement or something like that, that we could, document to show that there has been some activity that started on the project, even if it's not starting to actually expend the funds. So I just want to bring attention to that. Also, fiscal year 22, we are just waiting on one more signature for our funding agreement, and then we'll be getting the fund transfer agreements out to project sponsors. So does anybody have any questions on this? Sean?
You clarify for me, it looks like on our 21 SON, the start date shows is 2023, but ends in 22. Is that supposed to be start December of 21, I think?
The start deadline for the
third project?
So yeah, that one, there's actually more flexibility in terms of start date on that one because we actually took a while to get that agreement executed. So that is 24 months from when the agreement was executed.
So we don't have to technically start the project, but we would have to request to extend the project to start it and then keep it going.
Right, yes, it is a little odd with that one. So the expiration date is before the start deadline, but
Okay, just wanted to make sure, thanks.
sure. All right, unless there's any other questions, let's move on. The next item in the agenda is the draft comprehensive transportation plan. And we do have a presentation. Some of you may have already seen it at our board meeting on Monday. Maybe we could actually get a show of hands if anyone was in attendance, Emily. So maybe you'll be the only one that has to see it again. All right, I'm going to go ahead and share the presentation. Let me bring it to the right slide first. Sorry about that. All right. Oops, sorry. Okay, I think I got it now. And Janet will start us off. Janet, you're on mute.
As Dana mentioned, we've given this presentation a few times, and we're already aware of some of the things that need to be changed. There's been an interest in GHG reducing projects, which of course include transit. I'm sorry, I'm looking over here now because that's where you are. So I'm going to give it as is, and then we can talk about it afterward. So I'm pleased to present today the draft comprehensive transportation plan moving forward 2050. This is an information item, or was an information item for discussion and feedback. We'll bring it back to the board in September for final approval. So action wasn't required then. Sorry, I'm still trying to adjust my screen. Well, the CTP in many ways is different from the last one. It is substantively an update. As it turns out, many of our transportation needs are the same today as they were in September 2016 when the last plan was adopted. We need more transportation options. We need them to be implemented in ways that are thoughtful of communities' needs and attuned to sustainability. Changes to this plan include an update of the vision and goals and increased public engagement with community-based organizations to better connect with historically underserved members of the community. The importance of maintaining and updating the plan is twofold. First, MTC requires local transportation authorities like SCTA to establish a transportation plan that can feed into the larger regional transportation plan, which is Plan Bay Area. Plan Bay Area is a federally required long-range planning document. Secondly, SCTA is responsible for programming, allocating numerous state and federal funding sources to transportation projects. In order to meet these requirements, the SCTA needs a policy and planning document to help guide the programming process. If the SCTA does not meet these two requirements, it is at risk of losing critical transportation dollars. Next, please. The CTP update began in 2019 and followed the process shown on this slide. We started with a public engagement strategy and an update to the vision and goals of the plan. We worked with our partners on inventorying the system and reviewing trends. We also updated the list of projects and tested their performance against the goals. Each step was reviewed by the advisory committees, and there were several steps where the board took action, such as approving the goals on March 2020. Next, please. Kickoff for the CTP was spring of 2019, which launched public outreach that's been continuous in one form or another since then. A call for projects was released June 2019, and in late 2019, we began a 5-month process that culminated in an updated vision and set of goals that was approved March 9th, which was the last time we saw the board in person. The activities then went virtual and work continued on current conditions, forecasts, and technical analysis, including performance analysis of the project list. Writing the plan itself has been the focus of attention this year. This presentation to release the draft document. And more outreach will bring it back. After more outreach, we'll bring it back to the board for approval on September 13th. Next, please. Chapter 1 lays out who we are, why we plan, and what our priorities are. This photo is from an early outreach at Community Action Partnership Sonoma. Next. The SCTA has had a comprehensive transportation plan since 2001. The initial plan laid out priority projects and policies, many of which have been successfully implemented, including mega projects like Carpool Lane and 101 and passenger rail service. Although some of the outstanding issues remain, like potholes and the need for more bikeways and transit, The plan serves as an important role in establishing how we need to address transportation needs and in guiding funding decisions to address those needs. Next, please. Equity is a priority. As a transportation agency, we rely on demographic information, including poverty levels, to define geographic locations that can be prioritized for transportation projects. The communities of concern, now known as Equity Priority Communities, EPCs, along with Caltrans's disadvantaged communities, are useful tools to bring attention to underserved communities. Communities in need may not live in concentrated neighborhoods, especially in Sonoma County, where economically disadvantaged people are dispersed throughout the suburban and rural parts of the county. Addressing the whole population of disadvantaged people with means-based fares and other policies, along with more robust outreach, are steps toward equity. Next. Public engagement began with the in-person meetings with CBOs and at libraries, then morphed into virtual engagement, including a series of webinars. You can see the webinars on the CTP website. We will receive comments on this plan until August 13th in preparation for the final document in September. Next, please. These were the top issues of phase 1 of outreach. I don't think there are any surprises there. More about outreach. Next, please. These slides from the Go Sonoma polling reflect many of our findings from outreach overall. Topping the list of concerns are potholes, GHG emissions, congestion, safety, and access. Next, please. As the list continues, you'll show priorities of concerns. Next, please. So in late 2019, the board reviewed performance of the plan and progress made on the goals overall. After a series of workshops, the board approved the vision and goals. The vision is connecting people, places, and goods as we transition our transportation network to zero emissions by 2050. Our guiding principles are to improve safety, equity, and quality of life. The goals that our transportation should be connected and reliable, safe and well-maintained, community-oriented and place-based, and zero emissions. Next, please. Okay, there's a lot of information on this slide. Here's an overview of the transportation project types included in the CTP. The CTP is not a constrained plan, but the reality of delivering projects is limited by funding. Greater project analysis and opportunity for decision-making will happen as funds are programmed. This list is not exclusive. If a spectacular project emerges out of the blue with a source of funds next year, after the CTP is approved, we can include it. That said, funding is a huge challenge. Please note that we have a known funding line there at the bottom. We're still working on updating that number. But the takeaway is that we have $10+ billion in projects, as opposed to our less than $2 billion in known funding. Maintenance is a considerable proportion of the roadway improvements. Then there are twice as many bike and ped projects as in the last plan. Several significant project types like multimodal streetscape improvements, new tech, and TDM are new. This project list with details is online at the SCTA website. Next, please. Okay, this chapter is about our community, and I'm going to turn it over to Chris Barney.
Thanks, Janet, and good morning, everyone. Good to see everyone today. So every time we update the CDP, we take a chance to look at the transportation system and population in the county as it is now, and how we expect things could change in the future. So currently in Sonoma County, there are about 500,000 people living here, and we expect the population to increase from anywhere from 5 to 20% by 2050. Next slide, please. So I've included a few slides here showing how we expect the makeup of the population to change going forward. So first here on the left, you can see that the population is expected to continue to age by 2050, with the working age population to drop below 50% and seniors making up almost a third of the total population by 2050. So along with the changing age demographics, we expect the transportation needs to change as well. So along with that, we expect Sonoma County to become more diverse going forward as well. Next slide, please. So the future is always uncertain, but it's important to try and anticipate how the county will change over time. So this slide actually shows estimates of current population, housing units, and employment in blue, the 2019 number or line on the graph, along with different ways of looking at future growth and change in the county. So there are three different forecasts shown on these charts. One is showing the development pipeline, so that's directly to the right of the current population of 2019. And so the development pipeline represents projects that are currently somewhere in the planning process at the local jurisdiction level and will likely be built this year out to 10 years. So this is a short-term forecast and looking at projects that will likely be built pretty soon. The next bar, the green bar there towards the center of each of these graphs, so shows estimates of maximizing local plans or general plan build out. And this is basically just looking at if the zoning and development capacities in each of the plans was completely constructed out, how population, housing units, and employment would change in Sonoma County. And then finally, on the far right, I've included forecasts from Plan Bay Area 2050 that are compiled at the MTC or regional level. Next slide, please. So as part of this CTP update and with the support of you and our local jurisdictions, we were able to compile the Sonoma County Travel Behavior Study. I know most of you have already heard some about that already, but this project really provided a wealth of information about transportation and travel and where people are traveling from and going to in Sonoma County. So I just wanted to highlight a few of the points we were able to pull from the travel behavior study and that will help us as we plan for transportation going forward. So the first of which is highlighted on this slide. The travel behavior study illustrated that just about 90% of trips in Sonoma County stay in Sonoma County. So, we're doing a good job of providing destinations and housing for people here in the county. About 9% of people come in or go out each day, and a small proportion pass all the way through the county. Next slide, please. So two other main points that we saw as we were examining the data in the travel behavior study, first of which is that 60% of trips are shorter than 5 miles. And then along with that, about 30% are under 2 miles. So along with this, there are a lot of opportunities associated with those short trips. These are trips that could quite easily be shifted onto other travel modes, non-auto travel modes, such as walking, biking, and transit. We also saw that, even though 90% of trips stay in the county and 10% or 9 or 10% go in or out, those trips that leave the county or come into the county are generally quite a bit longer than those trips staying in the county and contribute a lot of VMT and total travel. One thing that we did see is a lot of these longer trips are occurring in the Highway 101 corridor. And so there are lots of opportunities to shift those onto other more efficient modes like rail or express bus or carpooling. Next slide, please. So as we are looking at the data, the current data and the forecasts and information from the travel behavior study, we identified a number of opportunities and challenges facing us associated with transportation going forward. So starting with the opportunities, as I already said, 60% of daily trips in Sonoma County are under 5 miles. So a lot of opportunities to shift those to walking, biking, and transit and non-auto modes. As I also already said, 90% of the trips stay in the county. So We've done a pretty good job of providing destinations and job sites in the county. We need to continue to do that and, make sure that there continues to be good jobs housing balance and better jobs housing balance in the county as well. There's a focus at the planning level on city-centered growth in the county. Jurisdictions are committed to urban growth boundaries and building in the right places. This can provide better accessibility and safety and make it further easier to walk, bike, and take transit. And we also saw over the last year in 2020 that telecommuting and just not taking trips really has some potential to reduce BMT, or at the very least to shift travel to less congested time periods. So we've seen a number of challenges still facing us. In the last number of years, we've seen how emergencies can really impact travel conditions and patterns, not only during the actual events, but afterwards as well, as people are displaced. That changes their travel conditions and can cause some issues and problems we need to deal with. We've seen that travel in the county continues to be focused on the single occupant vehicle and automobiles. So lots of opportunities to improve there. And though even most of the travel stays in the county, those trips coming in or leaving the county each day are quite long and still contribute a lot of BMT. So another issue we can continue to work on. So next slide, please. So I can turn it over to Dana. So there is a question. Is it okay if I address that right now in the chat?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So Steve, you're asking, how is travel outside of the county treated by the region? Steve, maybe you can elaborate on that question a little bit. Is that how MTC or the regional government is considering out of county travel? Maybe you can just clarify the question. You're muted, Steve.
I'm curious, looking at the big picture, we have travel that's in the county, and then we have some travel that originates here. And then there is travel that comes from outside the county into the county that originates elsewhere. How do the Air Resources Board and the region look at those long distance trips in terms of assigning responsibility to either the receiving county or the county of origin?
Yeah, it's somewhat a boundary issue, right? Like here in Sonoma County, we do have 2 air districts that have responsibilities here. I don't know if there are any assignments being made for those trips crossing those boundaries. The MPC also ends at our county line to the north, but we do still, people from Mendocino County and Lake County still come here, and we go there as well. So, we certainly consider that in our plan, and that, the travel behavior study and some improvements we've made to our tools consider that here locally. But that's, I think that's a good question that we can take to those regional bodies and, continue to talk to them about going forward.
Chris, if I might, sorry. I don't think that MTC looks at it the same way we do, or rather in terms of what Chris is talking about right now. They are more interested in GHG emissions from specific projects. So they're interested in the whole. They're not particularly concerned about, they're interested in where the project is, not where the trips start and end. Is that correct, Chris?
Yeah, I would offer that requirements for SB 743 have kind of pushed this issue to the forefront somewhat. So when individual projects are analyzed as part of the environmental review process, those EIRs should be considering, the total length of trips, even if they leave a certain jurisdictional boundary. So, at least at the individual project level, those longer regional trips should be considered in that analysis. So if there are no, Janet or Dana or Steve, if we feel okay with those answers, I think I can turn things over to Dana.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Thanks, Chris, and thanks, Steve, for a good question. So Chapter 3 lays out the current transportation system in Sonoma County and discusses the transportation projects that were submitted for the CTP, the vision, and trends and innovation by mode. This chapter covers roads, highways, the bicycle and pedestrian system, the transit system, and programs that support non-single occupancy vehicle modes. There are over 2,600 miles of public roadway in Sonoma County, which is far greater than other counties in the region, including those with much higher populations. Over half of the roadway mileage is in the unincorporated county. The estimated cost to maintain a state of good repair on our roads is $3 billion over the next 3 years. These roads see over 1.6 million trips on an average weekday. And as Chris mentioned, a significant percentage of the trips are within the county. And here we have listed some of the top trip generators in the county. So the road and highway projects in the CTP include improvements to highway interchanges, intersections, intelligent transportation systems and new technologies, multimodal streetscape improvements, roadway improvements, maintenance, including bridge replacements. And the estimated cost for these projects through 2050 total $4.035 billion. Innovations on the road and highway systems center around intelligent transportation systems, which are constantly evolving and can improve safety and efficiency. The wide rollout of autonomous vehicles has not come as quickly as we may have earlier thought, but we still must be planning these carefully to avoid potential negative impacts, including increased vehicle miles traveled and greenhouse gas emissions. So the next section in the plan is in Chapter 3 is on the bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. And although only 8% of trips in Sonoma County are taken by bicycle or by walking, what we found through the travel behavior study shows that there is good potential to shift more trips to these modes. There are currently about 208 miles of bikeways on the ground, and over 1,000 more are planned. In the CTP, we have 111 bicycle and pedestrian projects, and these include projects that are over $1 million, and then one project per jurisdiction that combines all of the other projects in that jurisdiction. Implementation of all 111 bicycle and pedestrian projects, including those 1,000 miles of bicycle lanes, is estimated to cost $860 million. A majority of the planned projects are on-road Class 2 lanes, followed by Class 1 and then Class 3. And we have a small amount of Class 4 lanes planned. Some of the larger projects included in the plan are countywide expansion of micromobility, completion of the Smart Pathway, the Highway 101 overcrossing in North Santa Rosa, the Southeast Greenway and multi-use path in Santa Rosa, and then Class 2 bicycle lanes on Highway 1 and Highway 128. So 2020 was a big year for biking and walking. With COVID-19 restrictions, closed gyms, changed and limited routines, many people spent more time outdoors, taking walks and riding bikes. And across the country, bicycling increased an estimated 20%. And 1 in 10 American adults rode a bike for the first time in a year. Bike sales increased roughly 65%, and electric bike sales increased by 145%. The slow streets movement picked up as there was more demand for space to walk while physical distancing, and open air for dining. And some of these projects are, some jurisdictions are taking steps to make some of these projects that were temporary more permanent. The public transit system in Sonoma County includes services provided by 6 agencies and covers the wide stretches of our geography, with more services concentrated in the more populated areas, of course. In 2019, there were over 4.4 million rides on public transit in Sonoma County. And a large portion of transit riders are lower income. A large percentage do not have access to a vehicle. And high school and college students also make up a large portion of the transit riders. Here is a sampling of the types of projects submitted by transit agencies in the CTP. These total over $5 billion. The non-capital improvements include operating cost per service, service enhancement, first and last mile operations, fare-free programs, paratransit operations, and more. The transit capital projects include new buses, fleet electrification, bus stops and shelters, smart extension, facilities, and maintenance. The intelligent transportation systems and new technologies include projects like traffic signal timing, fare payment technology, and marketing. Trends and innovation in transit discussed in the CTP include microtransit with dynamic trip routing and on-demand service, improved technologies for trip planning and fares, transit priority projects that allow transit to bypass traffic congestion, and the future potential for automation of transit vehicles. The next section is on mode shift project programs, which more often is referred to as transportation demand management, or TDM. And this is a collection of methods and actions intended to improve the efficiency of the existing transportation system by reducing the demand for single occupancy vehicle travel, especially during peak commute times. Projects in this category in the CTP include a Green Trip pilot program that would customize Green Trip tools for Sonoma County, and Transportation Management Association development, which would provide a variety of transportation demand management services to individuals and groups of employers, residential developments, and institutions. This could include things like sales and promotion of TDM and transit products, a central information source for vehicle mile travel reduction options, and management of funding and initiatives. So here are some of the programs that are underway now for mode shift and are discussed in the plan. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Chris to talk about Chapter 4 and performance and goals.
Thanks, Dana. So as part of each CTP, we evaluate performance and look at how the projects and policies in the plan can help us reach the plan goals and objectives. So next slide, please. So over the last few planning cycles, we've followed the 3-stage process where we start out by looking at existing conditions, and progress we've made since the last plan and reported out on that. And then also looking at baseline or no build conditions in the future without a plan. Then we've looked at 2050 travel conditions with different projects, the project list in the plan, and evaluated that using the Sonoma County travel model and other tools we have available to us. And then finally, we test and evaluate how non-project factors like changes in travel behavior, technologies, and different policies could help us meet the plan goals. Next slide, please. So when we're evaluating performance, it's important to have a measuring stick or something to measure against. So we use performance measures to evaluate, how we're doing and to make sure we're moving in the right directions and in the right trajectory. So we've updated all of the goals as part of this plan update, as Janet presented earlier in this presentation. And so along with that, we had to go back and reevaluate the performance measures that we've been using in the plan. So we removed some, we changed some, and we updated some. And we evaluated the performance measure list that we had and saw that there was a lot of overlap between the different goals. So this chart shows the different performance measures on the left-hand column, along with the different goals along the top in the rows: connected and reliable, safe and well-maintained, community-oriented and place-based and zero emissions, and shows how each of these performance measures relate to each of the goals. And I would just highlight for the TTAC, the performance measures associated with transit use and active transportation. So we've looked at mode shares, mileages of bicycle facilities, and then on the transit side, transit revenue hours and transit ridership, total and per capita. So next slide, please. So as part of the performance evaluation, we found that the plan would provide improved transit service coverage and transit ridership. And I would just mention that this is looking at financially unconstrained transit improvements. So with that assumption in place, we see a pretty significant increase in transit vehicle revenue hours and increases in transit ridership, both total and per capita. With the implementation of the CDP, we'd see an expanded bicycle and pedestrian system and connectivity. So many miles of new bicycle and pedestrian facilities would be available and on the ground. We'd see shorter travel times and trips and better access to transit, or better access to employment and destinations. Next slide, please. We'd see a slight decrease in lower household travel costs, and this would be mostly from shorter trip lengths. If people have to travel shorter distances, the cost would be slightly lower. And then finally, we see a trend of VMT and greenhouse gas emissions going down on a per person or per capita basis. So next slide, please. So it's important to call out that in the CTP project list, there are many projects that are really focused on improving local conditions, and the tools we have available to us, like the travel model and some of these other quantitative evaluation tools, aren't really focused on evaluating those local benefits. They're looking at regional and countywide and corridor metrics and benefits. So you know, that being said, a lot of these projects are really focused on local safety, improving neighborhood mobility and connectivity, actually improving the experience for transit riders at the stop location or transfer point, making ADA improvements, improving local operations, things like that. So these are all other project benefits that are really focused on the local level that are really difficult to capture as part of our countywide performance assessment. Next slide, please. So there are a number of remaining challenges. You know, I highlighted some of the positives that we saw as we analyzed the plan. There is still a continued reliance on automobiles going forward, even though there is an increase in transit and walking and biking. As a percentage of total travel, it stays about the same as it does today. We see increased traffic congestion and delay, especially in the peak periods. I did mention that the project list is unconstrained, and so, you know, only a small portion of the total projects are currently funded. That includes maintenance and project capital improvements. And then using the tools that we have available, we didn't see a reduction in countywide collision rates. You know, but there are specific projects underway that are working on addressing safety and collisions specifically, like the Countywide Vision Zero project. Next slide, please. So one thing we've done over the last two plans is look at how we can achieve our CTP vision and goals and objectives. And so we've identified a number of things that we really should focus on and work on to be able to achieve those goals and objectives. You know, important actions like making equity part of every decision-making process when we're looking at policies and projects, shifting modes from single occupant vehicle trips to bicycle and pedestrian trips. We saw the opportunity here in Sonoma County that we have a lot of trips that are pretty short, and if we can help shift some of those into other modes, that would help us move closer to achieving our goals. Implementing Vision Zero policies, increasing our vehicle fleet fuel economy, maximizing transit ridership. These are all things that we need to focus on and work on to be able to achieve our goals going forward. So with that, I'll go ahead and pass things over to Janet to wrap things up.
Thanks, Chris. So this is the WOW slide, $8.6 billion shortfall. I'd also like to point out that on slide 12, there was a neat pie chart of projects, and transit made up over half of them, over $5 billion in projects. As we know, this is the unconstrained project list, meaning we only have funding for less than $2 billion in projects, as we know now. Thankfully, we have over $800 million in local funds, namely Go Sonoma, to leverage outside fund sources to deliver projects. Next, please. All right, so we've taken this presentation to everybody that we can so far. And on July 20th, there will be a webinar that will be like this presentation, but hopefully with some updates to the slides. We'll be taking public comment on the plan until August 13th and bring the final back to the board for approval in September. Next, please. All right. This is our time for questions and comments. We'd love to hear what you think of the presentation and the plan. Thank you for your attention so far. Appreciate it.
Right. And I see a hand raised by Steve. Oh, I think you remuted yourself, Steve.
One thing that I think we ought to be aware of is that in the spring of this year, they moved the goalposts as far as when we would try to reach carbon neutrality from 2050 to 2030. And there was some discussion of that, of course, on Monday, and that'll require some more work. But I think from a transit perspective, that means that we really do need to look at 2030 as the date when we get transit ramped up to the point that it really has much more frequency and much more convenience. So for this group, I think that's a very meaningful change.
Yeah, we have our work cut out for us in the next 9 years.
Yes, indeed.
So I'd like to hear from transit operators if you feel that transit is well represented in the presentation, and if you have any comments moving forward, or if any of you had a chance to look at the plan itself. It is online on our website. Yeah, it's a lot.
I know that the transit operators did get a chance to review an earlier admin draft of the transit section earlier on, so there shouldn't be too many surprises in there if you haven't taken a look at it, the draft version yet.
Okay, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. All right, next on the agenda is an update on the future of transit ad hoc. We did have a meeting last Thursday, and where we had some updates on the phase 1 work plan tasks, as well as a presentation from the Napa Valley Transportation Authority on their on-demand microtransit projects that really kind of evolved in response to things that were going on during COVID-19. And we heard a lot of interesting information about how they are, kind of how that's the opportunities moving forward with on-demand microtransit on Napa Vine. And I think it was definitely of interest to the committee to hear about that. And then we also just discussed some updates on what's going on with the Blue Ribbon Transit Recovery Task Force. So does anybody have anything to add to that update or any questions? Okay, we don't have our next meeting scheduled yet, but I assume we'll start looking at a date for that fairly soon. The next item on the agenda is a standing item on the MTC Blue Ribbon Transit Task Force, Transit Recovery Task Force. And I will just kind of summarize what I know is next, in that there is a meeting coming up on, I believe it's July 26th. So the Monday after next. And at that meeting, there will be an update on network management, as well as an action taken on the action plan. So I'll just open up for discussion if anybody has anything related to the task force that they'd like to discuss. All right. Steve, did you have your hand up for this item or from the previous CTP item? You are on mute still. Okay. All right. All right, let's move on to item number 7. I included MTC's memo from the Transit Finance Working Group meeting last week on the Bus Transit Priority and Transit Performance Initiative item. I just wanted to bring it to this committee for discussion if there is anything relevant to discuss regarding bus transit priority, if any of the agencies have projects in mind that would impact multiple transit operators and had anything that they wanted to discuss on this. So I think right now MTC is really just kind of looking for some feedback on how this program would be rolled out and any kind of challenges or barriers to implementation that are foreseen. So with that, I will just open it up to the group if there's any discussion on this. All right, so either there aren't plans in the works, or you all have it know what's going on, so that's fine. All right, next we have operator updates, and let's start with Petaluma Transit.
Good morning, everyone. Good to see you. Not a whole lot from us on our end. We've been providing summer school service that started on June 14th, running through July 23rd. That was a bit of an ordeal because we were ready to provide the service on a Monday and found out the Thursday before that the venue had been moved from Casa Grande High School to Petaluma High School, of which we weren't informed. So there's a little bit of a scramble there to be able to adjust and provide that service, which we're doing right now. And then going into the fall, we've been informed that more or less Petaluma City Schools is expecting everything to be back to normal. So we're going to be providing them with kind of the regular school tripper service that we had been providing previously in pre-COVID times. And so we're currently working on our August schedule right now to get that finalized. We're wrapping up our Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan, or PTASP, that is now completed. We'll be doing some additional outreach at the schools as part of the orientation next month as well. And I believe that's about it for now, other than ARPA work and things of that nature.
Thanks, Jared. All right, how about an update from SMART next?
Hello, everyone. Let's see. Our ridership continues to slowly return. I just looked at the year-end data. It looks like the fiscal year is down 78% overall between FY20 and FY21, which is just about, in line with, I think, what everyone's been seeing. June was up 47% over May. Total ridership, a couple of extra days, but still is quite a big jump. So that's a good sign. And, we started running Saturday service again about a month ago, and ridership's been doing very well on Saturdays. We did run one Sunday in coordination with Golden Gate, free ferry and bus promo they did last weekend, or 4th of July weekend. And that did pretty well, but we unfortunately don't have enough staff available, crews available to run Sunday service right now. So Golden Gate is reinstating, I'm sure as David will report, their Sunday Larkspur ferries, but we don't have the ability to do trains right now, but hoping by the fall we'll have enough staff. So that's, I think, all I've got.
Thanks, Emily. And maybe we could hear from Golden Gate next. David, we can't hear you. It doesn't look like you're on mute, but we can't hear anything. No. Okay. Maybe while he is logging back in, we could.
Hey, Dana, sorry to interrupt. I need to jump off at 11. Do you mind if I hop in here? From
That'd be
Marin
great.
Transit? Okay.
Thanks, Robert.
Yeah, thank you. Our big focus areas right now, we have our triennial next week. So we have been combing together and working with our auditors to get materials ready for our triennial next week. It sounds like Sonoma County Transit may also be going through that process right now. We are also kind of in the end stages of our Marin Access RFP. And thanks to Santa Rosa City Bus and Yuri for joining the evaluation panel on that project. That for the first time, we will be combining all of our paratransit and mobility management programs into one single contract. They're currently spread out over 3 contracts between our eligibility and our operations and maintenance and some of our other non-ADA programs. So it's a pretty big contract, a big award, and we're hoping to take that to our August board meeting, but that may have to get pushed out until September. On the service side, we're now back to running full service, including Muir Woods service that was reinstated on June 19th. And right now our big focus is getting ready for the schools this fall. So I would be curious to know if other agencies, I think it was 2 years ago, the state of California passed a law that required all high schools to start no earlier than 8:30. And this year is the first year that that law will be required, which is creating a lot of challenges for our ability to serve multiple high schools. We serve 6 different high schools across the county, and historically we were able to reuse vehicles in the morning because the bell times had enough separation. But I'd be curious to know if any others are facing that challenge, or if any other agencies serve multiple high schools. But that appears to be a big challenge for us going back into the fall. And that's it for me, Dana.
Thanks, Robert. Yeah, and you mentioned the triennial review. I know that Sonoma County Transit is not here today because they are going through their triennial review this morning. So David, let me try again, see if your sound's working.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Computers. Let's see. As Emily mentioned, we operated free service on our bus and ferry system July 3rd through the 5th. We saw very good turnout. I looked at the bus numbers and we were running at about 85% of July 4th 2 years ago in 2019. So it's good to finally see some people back in the system. And our ferry service did very well as well. In terms of our system performance, we're slowly gaining our riders back. Our busiest day since the pandemic started was this past Friday, July 9th, where we carried about 3,000 people on our buses and about 1,300 people on our ferries. Also, July 4th weekend, we did run Larkspur and Sausalito ferry service. For those of you who may not have known, our Sausalito service was out while the float was repaired, and that means that Sausalito ferry was not running for about 3 months. That started back up on June 23rd with a limited weekday schedule. And so July 4th weekend was our first weekend of running weekend ferry service for both Sausalito and Larkspur. And then as of this past weekend, we have returned to operating a Larkspur and Sausalito ferry service on the weekends. Let's see what else. As of July 1st, we do have our last annual installment of fare changes. Some fares went up a quarter here and there, and we did have one set of fares go down a quarter. What we had done over the past 5 years is collapse our fare zone down in terms of payment, so it's a little bit easier for our passengers and our drivers to understand when they're out in the field. So it seems to have gone smoothly, which is good. And other than that, we are still kind of testing the waters for when we would want to bring back more commute service. So far, the only thing we have on the books beyond what we're running right now is to return service back to San Anselmo on our route that currently we're terminating in San Rafael. And that's the Route 27. But in terms of Sonoma County, we don't have a start date yet for any new commute service, but we are anticipating separating out Petaluma from Roanoke Park and Santa Rosa once again when the time comes. Right now, we're running a combined service on Route 72. Speaking of Petaluma, the only other outstanding item I have in terms of general service is I'm still waiting to hear back from the city of Petaluma on whether we'll get any downtown Petaluma bus stop changes. So I don't know, Jared, if you've had a chance to run that up the flagpole there, but I think that's the one outstanding item that I need an answer on as we work through our service restoration.
Okay. Yeah, I'll get back to you on that then.
Sounds good. And I think that's about it for us.
All right.
Oh, actually, one more thing. For those of you who, I don't know, I think we probably had the most drastic change in service during the pandemic compared to the rest of you. I mean, SMART was probably more similar than not to us in this regard. But we are going to our board of directors at the end of this month to discuss, or actually next week, I think, to discuss the Title VI implications of all of our service suspensions. We don't have any, so we will be taking, hopefully taking action for the board to adopt a Title VI analysis that shows that all of our service suspensions did not have disparate or disproportionate impact to the communities of concern that are required there. So that's for our bus service. We are planning on restoring our ferry service to within a range that's allowed under our Title VI policy. So we did not have to analyze our ferry service. And I think that's kind of where we're at on that. Once the board takes that action, then we'll kind of have a blank slate, if you will, for restoring service under, you know, the provision that the FTA has for demonstrations. So we'll have up to a year before we have to go through a public process to finalize those new routes.
Thank you, David. All right, how about an update from Santa Rosa City Bus?
So Matt gave me a little bit of information. Our fiscal year 21 ridership total was 766,919. So that is a percentage change of 47% over last year's, over fiscal year 20. And it is still 57% of the non-pandemic fiscal year of fiscal year 19. So, you know, we haven't gotten back to 100%, but we are getting there slowly. We did have our youth program initiated on July 1st. So it's only been a couple of weeks. And so far using that program, we have 1,046 rides. That's for the kids K through, or TK through 12. And so, you know, it's off to a decent start. Our contract for our installation of the electric chargers here at our MSC station was signed, and our contractor has already given us our 35% plans to review. So we're hoping to get those finalized and installed by the end of the calendar year, perhaps. And I'm gathering a little bit more information on the last couple of vehicles to report to the ICT, the CARB ICT fleet update. I'm just wondering how everybody's doing on that. You know, I was surprised when I heard that we were supposed to also be getting data for vehicles that we retired since January 1st, 2018, if they were in service December 31st, 2017. So I basically had to start scrounging around for data that was from before my time for it. So I was just wondering how everybody else was doing on the ICT fleet reporting, but I should have it all in time for their new deadline of the 23rd, which is like next week. I think that's all of our updates.
We submitted ours, Sean. It was a little tricky. It's pretty technical, some of the data they asked, like engine displacement size and things like that.
Family name.
Yep, all that. I was a bit surprised the level of detail they want. But yeah, we were able to get it and submit it. And then it was a bit unclear kind of the distinction on some of the vehicles like cutaways. I think they wanted us to report everything 14,000 pounds and over, and our cutaways kind of fall just on either side of that line, really.
Yeah, I decided I'm just going to report all. I think the newer ones we purchased are less than that, but the ones that we currently had in our fleet prior to December were over it. So I was like, you know, it's with so many fleet lists, I just thought, you know what, here's my fleet, you know, do what you want with it.
Oh, and the form online was a bit cumbersome. I had to manipulate a few of the data points to get the online system to accept it correctly.
Yeah, I figured I'm going to have to take the sheet that I'm working on and then input it into their clean sheet again to upload it, because I got a feeling that I probably have tweaked some of the cells. And I heard there's a lot of issues if you're changing values and stuff like that. So
yeah, be ready once you upload it for about 20 or 30 values. You'll probably have to manually edit.
Good to know. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Sean. All right, the next item on the agenda is transit fairs, including Clipper Start. We did get some questions at our board meeting on Monday on the usage of Clipper Start. I didn't have a great answer, but just gave a summary of what I last heard is that it's kind of been a slow uptake in Sonoma County, but there has been some usage. So I'll just open it up. I'd be happy to hear if anybody has any updates on that program or other transit fair related topics.
I can say for SMART that the Clipper Start usage is still less than 1% of riders. I think we had 55 people last month. So,
Okay.
hoping
Sounds
that-
like that's probably more than 2 months ago though, so.
It is. It's double. It's double, Dana.
And Scott looks like has updated our data. So we had for corridor 101, it looks like in April, Petaluma had 10 transactions and then Santa Rosa had 74 transactions. So definitely more than the 47 and 23 we had in March and February.
Okay, thank you. Good to know. Great. Does anybody have any other fair related items they wanted to discuss?
Has anybody started their resolution to continue the project since MTC has extended it? Or has MTC gotten to any of you with like a sample of resolution that they want to be submitted? Okay.
Sean, I know I saw that, but how long is the extension of the project for?
Can't remember if it's just another 18 months or if it's, I don't know.
Okay, I can look it up. I thought I saw it somewhere, so I can probably find it.
They've sent us some information, but I think at Golden Gate we had taken board action that I don't think had a closure date. So we're still figuring out if we actually need to go to the board again on this or not.
All right, thank you. Move on to item 10. Is there any other business comments or announcements? Not today. All right, thank you all for being here, and we'll see you again next month, if not before.
Thanks.
I
Okay.
Yeah.